Hello everybody, and welcome to a review of a car that I've been looking forward to driving for quite some time. Today I am driving a BMW E92 M3. Those who have watched the channel for quite some time may be a little bit confused because you'll know that I already owned an E92 M3. However, the vehicle that I owned was far from standard. It was a 625 horsepower, heavily modified track car. This is almost completely standard. And I am very grateful to its owner, Adam Ivor, for letting me loose in what I know is his baby. This car is his pride and joy. He is keeping an eye on it from the driver's seat of his bright yellow EG6 Civic that you can see behind us. And I'm going to be having a go of that fairly soon. But the M3, why am I so desperate to drive one of these? Well, it is for the very reason that my own car was so far from standard. The entire time that I owned it, I couldn't help but ask the question, would I actually have enjoyed an unmodified example a lot more? Let's find out. The heart of any E90 series M3 is the incredible BMW S65 V8. It is for sure a very flawed engine, having some known issues including rod bearings that do need replacement at fairly frequent intervals, but it is full of character, it loves to rev, and it is one of the last great naturally aspirated power plants. My own car, of course, was fairly effective, having 625 brake. These standard cars are supposed to put out about 420, but in reality, I think very few ever did. A really healthy one of these might see about 390 on a dyno. But there is nothing wrong with the way that this engine sounds, or how readily it spins up to that 8,600 RPM red line. Now, that engine is connected to a choice of two transmissions. You can have the same 6-speed gearbox that BMW offered in the E46 M3, a good drag item, or you could have their then brand new 7-speed dual clutch, the snappily named DCT. The DCT is a very good transmission, but not a great one. You see, the DCT has the choice of being either smooth or fast. It cannot really do both in the supernatural way that something like a modern PDK or Ferrari gearbox can, or even, to be honest, the 8-speed ZF. But it does therefore have a little bit more character. I'm now driving this car in the M mode, which Adam has set up almost identically to how I had mine. So the M button sits on the steering wheel and it's basically an individual preset. Now he's got the MDM mode on, which means that the traction control is in its half-off setting, so it allows a little bit of slip and play before intervening. This car, like mine, has no EDC, it's got no electronic dampers. And I'll get onto the ride in a little bit, so you can't change that. What you can change is what BMW have called the power setting. And it's a confusing choice of name because it does not change the power that the car has at all. That changes the response of the throttle. And he has it in Sport Plus, where I myself prefer Sport. Normals are just a little bit too flaccid, and Sport Plus for me is a little bit too much, but Sport is a good balance. He then has the gearbox in its number 5 mode, which if you have the MDM mode on, is the most vicious that you can choose. It gives you a little bit of a kick when you're changing up at high RPM, and you need to be careful because if you're in the right conditions, that will kick the back of the car out. It can easily take you by surprise, I can tell you. There are no fewer than 6 different levels for the DCT gearbox. Most of the time you'll only see the 5, but when you fully disengage traction control, a special 6th mode will appear. I recommend setting 2 or 3 for daily driving because then the gearbox is much smoother and behaves a little bit more like an automatic. One odd thing about the gearbox, and one of the reasons I say it's merely good rather than great, is the fact that there isn't any sport automatic mode. You have drive or you have do it yourself. And the problem is that if you choose drive mode, all the gearbox wants to do is get into 7th as quickly as it possibly can. Now that might in theory be decent for emissions, but It isn't really good for anything else. It's not a very helpful setting because this engine lives on revs. It really does. Allow me to demonstrate. You can see there the ferocity of that upshift. It's absolutely crazy. Now this car's geared actually pretty nicely, and honestly, there's enough mid-range punch to make this still an engaging drive. These aren't the lightest of cars. In fact, compared to the outgoing E46 M3, they're a little bit of a porker. And BMW would also claim that this new engine was just as efficient as the outgoing six-cylinder, but in reality, no, this is a thirsty old beast. So it's just as well that it sounds quite so good. What is confusing though is the suspension. The steering is all right. I'm going to give it that. I'm going to say that it's all right. I haven't really given it any thought so far, and that means that it's neither good nor bad. It's simply doing what I say and not really earning any brownie points. But the suspension... I know a lot of people are going to say that really this car should have been equipped with the EDC. But I've driven plenty of cars with passive dampers to know that there is no reason whatsoever to have to set up a passive system badly. In fact, in many ways, it's probably easier to set up a passive system better than an adaptive one, because you can then tailor the springs and dampers to suit each other perfectly. This car at low speeds is far too firm, and this road is actually pretty well paved, and the car does have something of a keen edge to turn in, but there's still a little bit of hesitation on its behalf, and still the ride is very firm. Now, okay, perhaps I've been spoiled because the car we've just been out in is my Ferrari 550, which Adam has had a go of, and that is probably one of the best damped cars ever. I'm not expecting this level of plushness when I get into the Honda. I had a choice of this or Honda first, and I chose this because I wanted to sort of be cosseted and be caressed before I had my head stoved in by the little Japanese missile behind us. And that means that as a cruiser, this car is compromised, and that really is the crux of this review. The E92 M3 doesn't really seem to know what it wants to be. To give you an idea as to how that suspension is set up, my own car, which rode far lower and was on KW V3s, was actually just as compliant. It really didn't feel any firmer than this at all. It was perfectly fine. And so I feel like BMW missed a trick. Maybe now I'll have to go and try on with the EDC to see if it's a transformative difference or if maybe it's not really that much of an effect, because I recently drove a Ford Mustang GT equipped with their MagnaRide system, and I found that it didn't really cure that many of the standard car's ills. As a place to be, the E92 is lovely. This is really, really nice. And I know that there is an argument to be made, and one that I can somewhat agree with, that this really was the beginning of the end for that legendary BMW build quality. Things in here aren't necessarily put together quite as well as in the E46. But I also feel like everything works. The two simple dials here are clear, easy to read, very nice to use. If you have Carly or something, you can even have the speedo set digitally in the middle. This iDrive system up here, great, easy to use. The car's got DAB, stereo works well enough. This vehicle, you may have noticed, is an M3 limited edition. In essence, that doesn't really mean anything. It means you've got this lovely triple stage and very metallic when you look closely mineral white paintwork. You've got the gloss black alloys, and you've got some piano black interior trim, some nice blue stitching. This car's also got a bit of extended leather here, although really you don't notice it, and it's a bit of a shame that there isn't just generally more of it. But I won't use that as a point of criticism, because generally this is a pretty nicely put together interior. This is a decent car. I like it. There's a whole bunch of blank switches down here. I can't really fathom quite how many features are missing that we have no fewer than 5 blank switches. Makes it almost pointless sort of having that at all, but hey, there you go. I'm being very cruel to Adam now by making him do a 3-point turn in the Civic. He's probably going to get me back for that. If you don't know who I'm talking about, by the way, you really should go and check out his channel, where you'll be able to learn a bit more about this car and a lot more about that one, because I'm really clueless about that. You'll also be able to see his review on my Ferrari as well. Brakes on this car do work well enough. They're expensive to replace. Running costs on old M3s are quite high. Not the easiest of cars to maintain. If you're looking at doing something on a budget, probably look elsewhere. Look more Civic direction, or S2000, anything. Just an M3, that's gonna be heavy on your wallet, in fuel, in maintenance, in servicing, everything else. In a few areas this is perhaps a little cheaper than the E46, but in most of the key ones, not enough of a difference really. I would personally enjoy one of these, I think, with the manual gearbox, and I do only subtle things to it. I could definitely see myself having one of these as a fun daily driver. There is just about enough room in the back there for passengers for reasonable duration journeys. That engine is incredible. It's so sonorous. Even though it's not the most effective, it's a lovely old thing to listen to. The real decision I would have to make would be between this and a B7 RS4, and I have serious love for the B7, but that, at least equipped with the Sport Suspension Plus, rides even firmer, and dynamically, I think maybe this is the better car. Maybe. But I'd really need to get them side by side. I know a lot of people are going to be screaming at the screen right about now, shouting, how on earth could you say that? Obviously the M3 is the better car. Obviously. Well, yeah, sure. And look, if we were on a track and we gave it to Tiff Needell or someone like that, you know, Chris Harris, this is going to be quicker than a B7 RS4. But I don't care. I don't care. I don't. I'm at that stage now where I'm not buying cars for that reason. I'm buying cars for the way that they make me feel. And this is modern enough that you could use it day to day and I wouldn't really feel like I was missing out on that much. It's only really the slightly out-of-date nav that is a pain, but you can work around it quite easily. There's an aux in for it, so you can just listen to your phone, put Waze on. That's fine. But it's still a special thing. There's enough details in here that mark it out from a regular 3 Series to make it worth its while, and most of its faults can be cured by the aftermarket. That is good. That is good. That is important. So I do really quite like the E92 M3. It's a flawed car, even in standard form. But it is a great one, and they're cheap right now. I don't think they're going to get realistically any cheaper than this. And okay, the price to purchase may go down, but as it is, these are in some cases 13-year-old cars. They have hard lives, M3s, and I gotta be honest, they're only gonna get harder as these cars become so cheap to buy. They're gonna get worse and worse, which means when you pick one up, you're gonna have to spend even more. And so we're gonna wind up with a situation that's happened with many cars, where good examples are gonna skyrocket in price, and then you're just gonna be left with a whole collection of duds. So if you've been thinking of one of these for a while, probably stop thinking and start buying. Thanks for watching, and a big old thank you to Adam for letting me drive his pride and joy. I've got to drive the Civic now. Bugger.